Hey everyone, it's Corey with BowHunterPlanet. Continue our series, Archery 101. Today we're going to talk about rests. And just like everything in archery, there's a million different kind of rests on the market, but probably the king, the most popular archery rest out there would be the Whisker Biscuit. Why? Super simple, super effective, comes on most ready to shoot packages or something, or some kind of a similar style rest to this. Very simple. How does it work? Put it on your bow, you drop your arrow in here, just like that. Line it up. When you shoot, your veins actually go through the whisker or the bristles in there. It's just hard to beat. It's super simple. A lot of people use this rest because it's so simple, and it's kind of idiot proof. There's no springs, there's no cords, there's no cables. It just works almost every time. You know, some of the disadvantages of it, I would say it's not quite as tunable as a lot of other rests that are out there on the market. And then over time, if your veins aren't attached really well, it can kind of start to wear on your veins. You know, might lead to a little bit more maintenance as far as your arrows and keeping things like that. But overall, great rest, by far one of, if not the most popular rest on the market today. So after that, you know, we kind of, I would say probably the most popular rest that a lot of archers using outside of something like that would be a drop away rest. So what is a drop away rest? Well, this is an example of a drop away rest. So this rest, when you shoot, it's set up. You can see that when you shoot, it drops out of the way. So when your arrow is coming down through, generally right before the vein, it'll support the arrow long enough to get it on its way so that it's not going to lose any elevation or fall, but it drops out of the way just in time for the veins to come through, so there's no contact with the veins like there is with the Whisker Biscuit or some other kind. And it makes, I think, things a little bit more tunable, maybe creates a little bit more clean arrow flight coming out of the bow. So there's two primary kinds of drop away rests. There's spring rest, like this QAD rest. And how it works is when you can cock the rest so that it stays up like this. And then when you draw the bow, the cable here, as part of its rotation through the cam system, gets pulled down. And it kind of cocks the rest when you come to full draw. And then when you let go, like that, it drops out of the way. So a spring pulls the rest down out of the way. Generally, pretty much foolproof. Rarely have I ever seen or heard of them not dropping out of the way unless there's some kind of a mechanical failure with the string here. I've heard of some people say that ice or cold can reduce the speed of the spring. Personally, never experienced anything like that. I think this is a great rest, and other rests that are similar to it are pretty foolproof. So good rest, good option for a drop away. The next kind of drop away rest would be a limb-driven rest. This one right here is from a company called Limb. Well, the model of the rest is Limb Driver. Pretty self-explanatory. So what happens with this rest, it kind of works opposite of the QAD, where a spring drives the rest down out of the way. This one uses a spring to pick the arrow up when you come to draw. So when we draw a bow and the cam rotates, the limb comes up like this. And in this situation, the rest is going to be pulled down like this when the bow is at full draw. Sorry, I got to turn it around. Okay, and then when you draw, and the top limb comes down, it's going to raise the rest like that. And then when you release the bow and the limb goes back up, it's going to pull on the string as the limb goes up, and it's going to pull that arrow holder, or the rest handle there, out of the way. So it's kind of more of a mechanical, it's a way of pulling the arrow rest out of the way so that the veins can clear, versus a mechanical spring pulling it down. So that's kind of, you know, your basic dropaways. Now, there's other rests out there that are kind of for target. There's one called I've heard it called a lizard tongue. Very similar to a limb driver rest that just holds the arrow, and your vanes can actually slide right down in between it. It absorbs a lot of vibration that the arrow might get going down it. It's primarily used for target. It's not used for hunting applications too much because it's kind of hard to keep it on there and kind of in a different situation when you're up in a tree and stuff like that. Another feature of some of these rests are what are called full capture. And a Whisker Biscuit is an example of a full capture. Once that arrow's in there, you can spin about any way you want, okay? And that arrow is gonna stay right where it is. Same with a QAD, like this. You can turn it any way you want and it's not gonna come off. So full capture is a great feature for hunting. And that way, as you're spinning around to shoot at an animal or anything like that, even if it bumps something, the arrow is likely going to stay on the rest. If you've got a rest like this limb driver, it's not a full capture rest. So the nice thing about this one is it's down, but it's still not a full capture rest, so it's likely to kind of jump around. They do make things that the arrow would snap into up here that makes it kind of a full capture, but it's not the same. But full capture is something, if you're gonna hunt a lot, I would highly recommend that whatever rest you get be a full capture rest. So, you know, that's our primary kinds of rests that are out there. Whisker Biscuit, dropaways, limb-driven dropaways, and then there's kind of, we'll call them spring-driven dropaways that are gonna pull it out of the way. But that's rests in a nutshell. So, you know, try some different ones when you go to your local pro shop. You know, dropaway rests are definitely gonna be more expensive, but once you get them tuned in and stuff, there's some definite advantages to them over your more simple style rest. But hey, simple is good too. So, till next time, I'm Corey Upper with BowHunterPlanet.com. Thanks for watching.